Revealed. Millionaire discovers surprising truth about daughter's secret school. Skipping at 3 a.m. Frank Mason paced the dark hallways of his suburban home, shadows draping like a shroud over the piles of framed awards and investments that formed the canvas of his life's achievements. The clock ticked closer to 3, and sleep evaded him, replaced instead with a gnawing realization. In building his empire, had he built a prison for his daughter Mia? The thinking made his stomach knot. For years, he had driven the engines of ambition, whipping into shape the lives of those around him, believing they needed direction, discipline, success. But now, a creeping doubt clawed at his mind. What if they also needed love? As he wandered into Mia's room, his eyes caught sight of the stray textbooks littering the floor, a chaotic mix of colorful covers, each recently ignored. Under the bed, he found a small stack of crumpled assignments, their contents a testament to neglect. A wave of betrayal washed over him. This couldn't be reality. Mia, by all accounts, was a bright student. Why had she been skipping school? He felt the familiar prick of anger mixed with a terrifying sense of helplessness. Had he pushed her too hard in the pursuit of excellence? The ambition he had instilled now felt like a choking vine. Frank's heart raced while he rifled through the forgotten remnants of his daughter's academic life. Sleeping Beauty, he thought, seeking reprieve from such relentless rigor. Was this the price they paid? He knew he must confront her in the morning, but self-doubt surged, whispering fears that this could unravel the carefully crafted world he held dear. A bridge built on strict discipline and unyielding success. Staring blankly at the walls adorned with medals, Frank wrestled with the internal conflict. With each passing moment, he felt time slipping away. What if Mia was struggling, emotionally crushed under a weight he had unknowingly placed upon her? He thought about reaching out for help, and the image of Ms. Jenkins, the wise counselor, flickered in his mind. But turning to her felt like admitting defeat. Yet, could it be a step toward understanding Mia's silence? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As dawn approached, Frank sat quietly on the edge of Mia's bed, heart thumping. The room felt stifled, each breath heavy with anticipation. The clock ticked. Each hand second echoed like thunder in his ears. He pictured Mia's withdrawn expression, walls built high, severing emotional connections that were once effortless. Did she even know what happiness felt like outside the confines of perfection he had crafted? The more he thought, the more the weight of expectation morphed into anguish, twisting in his gut. The door creaked as Mia opened it, her tired eyes filled with trepidation, and perhaps a flicker of something else. Fear or resistance, he couldn't tell. As silence hung thick between them, Frank's mind raced. Could he, a man so brilliantly successful, admit that his pursuit of wealth had cost him the very essence of familial bonds? Determined to reach her, he took a step forward, unaware that this singular moment could shatter everything. Would they fight to bridge the chasm of misunderstanding? Or would this be the final push into an abyss neither of them had anticipated? Frank felt the gravity of the moment coiling tightly around him. In the waning darkness of the early morning, he faced Mia, her fragile presence a living testament to the emotional abandonment he had inadvertently orchestrated. Her uncertainty mirrored his. It dawned on him that his tight grip on life had left no room for her vulnerabilities. As he opened his mouth to speak, words tangled in his throat, the tension brewing just beneath the surface, ready to erupt. Mia, we need to talk. He finally managed, the words tasting foreign. He had always spoken brusquely, instructively, his voice a beacon of authority. Now it felt unwelcome against the backdrop of his daughter's silence. She nodded, her gaze shifting from the floor to the wall, avoiding direct contact, and Frank's heart sank further. "Why have you been skipping school?" he probed, his tone softer, almost pleading. He watched her flinch, and the flicker of defiance that sparked in her eyes dissipated. Mia's shoulders slumped, and an invisible barrier stretched high, leaving him feeling small, impotent, yet desperately invested in breaking through. "It's not what you think," Mia murmured, her words barely escaping her lips. "It's not about school. Not really." Frank sensed a deeper revelation beneath her admission, and felt an instinctual urge to unearth it. "Then what is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, charged with urgency. This time she hesitated, a storm of emotions swirling behind her brown eyes. She looked so lost, so weighed down by invisible burdens, and Frank felt his own defenses weaken. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly see her, not as a reflection of his ambition, but as an individual wrestling with her own identity. "I'm tired of performing. Every day feels like an audition, Dad," she confessed, her voice cracking. "I want to be me, not this perfect daughter you think I am." Those words struck him like a physical blow. He had cultivated an image, not just for himself, but a mold for her to fit. In his relentless pursuit of excellence, he had neglected the crucial foundation of unconditional love. "Why didn't you tell me?" he pressed, desperate to dig deeper, yet fearing the answer. Would it confirm his deepest anxieties about their relationship? Was he truly so blind? "Because you wouldn't understand," Mia replied, the biting honesty lacing each word with undeniable pain. Frank absorbed her sentiment, grappling with the stark reality of his own shortcomings. He felt the anguish of an architect who now comprehended the flaws in his foundation. "Please, help me understand," he pleaded, his voice thick with raw emotion. "What do you need from me?" "Support. Just support," she whispered. And for a fleeting moment, hope danced in the air between them. It was fragile, yet illuminating, a light in the cacophony he had created. Frank inhaled sharply, catching the subtle beauty of her courage. "Okay, I will try," he promised, feeling an unfamiliar pressure in his chest, a blend of fear and something akin to liberation. This conversation, however painful, could present the opportunity for growth, for both of them. This marked a pivotal moment, a choice to embrace vulnerability instead of veiling it with the mask of success. Yet, as the conversation unfurled, unease replaced the initial warmth. How would he approach Ms. Jenkins? Opening the floodgates to deep-seated fears threatened to sink him further. Facing her felt like casting aside his armor. What if it revealed not strength, but fragility? As their discussion lingered, Frank couldn't shake the sense that a new chapter was unfolding, one where the scales tipped toward self-discovery over performance. But with every answer, new questions arose. How could he redefine his definitions of success so that Mia could reclaim her own identity? Would he be strong enough to accept an alternative vision of triumph? Time raced. The day's responsibilities awaited relentlessly. Yet now, all he could do was ponder the painful realization that while wealth had afforded him many things, nurturing emotional bonds with his daughter now felt like starting from scratch. As they finished their conversation, an idea simmered in Frank's mind. He had always believed in calculated moves, but could he now embrace uncertainty as part of the journey towards repairing their fractured connection? The time had come to face the reality of his choices, and whether the steps towards redemption would be enough to bridge the widening chasm or unravel them both. The weight of courage loomed over him, ripe with unanswered questions, but also a flicker of hope. Would he act before it was too late? The sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, casting a lattice of shadows across Frank's desk as he sat staring at the computer screen. The morning's revelations lingered like a haunting melody in his mind. Each keystroke felt mechanical, devoid of meaning compared to the emotional turmoil swirling within him. He had promised Mia that he would change, but where to begin? The prospect of confronting Ms. Jenkins, Mia's teacher, and the one seemingly holding all the cards, loomed ominously. Her authoritative presence had a way of flattening his resolve, yet he understood that if he wished for change, he could no longer rely solely on his imposing demeanor. Taking a deep breath, Frank pushed back from his desk and rose to his feet. He felt the weight of his responsibilities pressing down upon him, but he also recognized the undeniable urge to take action. The patterned rug underfoot was a stark reminder of his meticulously crafted life, one that seemed to be falling apart piece by piece. He grabbed his phone and hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. What would he say? What if things spiraled out of control? Past conversations with Ms. Jenkins vividly flooded his memory. Her stern voice echoed warnings about Mia's behavior, the unfortunate distractions, the imminent need for intervention. Would she see through his facade of confidence and understand the turmoil that lay simmering beneath? In that moment, Frank acknowledged an unsettling truth. He had often relied on others to navigate his path, assuming that his affluence shielded him from the vulnerabilities of everyday life. A sense of urgency washed over him, igniting a newfound determination. Perhaps it was time to shed the layers of his practiced persona. Dialing Ms. Jenkins's number, he felt a surge of nervousness until her voice cut through the air, cool and composed. "Mr. Hargrove," she answered, and something in her tone suggested she already sensed the gravity of the conversation. "Ms. Jenkins," he declared, his voice steadier than he expected. "I need to discuss Mia." As he spoke, he sensed an odd mixture of vulnerability and power, a realization that the act of seeking support for his daughter was, in itself, an act of courage. They arranged to meet at a nearby cafe later that day. While part of him recoiled at the prospect, another part felt invigorated by the essential act of engagement. The hours dragged on as anticipation twisted his stomach. Frank's mind danced between thoughts of self-doubt. Would he confront Ms. Jenkins effectively? Would she perceive him merely as an aloof businessman unable to connect with his daughter? He poured his thoughts into a notebook, scribbling down potential dialogue, another attempt to regain control. But performing the role of a concerned parent felt disingenuous. Instead, he needed to showcase raw honesty, a willingness to learn and adapt in front of Ms. Jenkins. He zeroed in on his greatest source of anxiety. If he could break the barrier of his own insecurities, would that simultaneously unlock the door for Mia as well? When the time finally came, Frank entered the cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the hum of lunchtime chatter. He spotted Ms. Jenkins at a table, her pen poised over a notepad, her concentration unwavering. Taking a deep breath, he approached her, reminding himself of the sincerity he had promised Mia he would uphold. "Thank you for meeting with me," he began, waiting for her to look up and meet his gaze. It was a small act, yet it felt monumental, the first step into an uncertain landscape of conversation. Would this encounter reveal not just answers about Mia, but perhaps insights about himself as well? Frank studied her expression, the lines on her forehead etched with concern. Time slowed as he prepared himself for a discussion that could either fortify his resolve or dismantle it entirely. In this moment, he realized something profound. The greatest battle lay not in external circumstances, but within himself. Would he seize the opportunity to redefine his role as a father, perhaps transforming both their lives in the process? As he began to speak, a flicker of fear ignited mixed with determination. The stakes had never been higher, yet the urgency of their situation loomed larger. Was he truly ready to face not just Ms. Jenkins, but the core of his parenting failures? With every word he uttered, the fragile thread of hope slipped into the waiting air, poised precariously over the depths of uncertainty. Frank sat down across from Ms. Jenkins, her pen still poised yet now inactive, as her gaze shifted from the page to him. He could sense the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a discussion about grades or classroom behavior. This was about their lives, and the emotional spaces that had been neglected for too long. "I know Mia hasn't been herself lately," he started, his voice threading the line between authority and vulnerability. "She's been struggling, and I'm afraid I haven't paid attention as I should have. I want to understand what's going on." Ms. Jenkins surveyed him, her expression unreadable. "Frank, I appreciate your willingness to confront this. Mia is a bright girl, but she's become disengaged in class. I suspect the issues may not solely stem from her environment here at school." His chest tightened. How had he missed this? An insistent, nagging thought crept in. Could her struggles be rooted in his failures? He had always seen himself as a provider, yet that very role had distanced him from his daughter's emotional landscape. "Disengaged," he echoed, forcing the word out. "In what way?" "She has been missing classes, showing up unprepared, and her overall enthusiasm has waned. This isn't just about academics. It's a cry for help," Ms. Jenkins added, her tone firm but compassionate. "As her father, the support you provide at home is crucial to her recovery." The implications stung. "I thought providing for her was enough," he admitted, almost as a confession. "I intended to give her everything I didn't have growing up, a life without worry. But in doing so, What? I've missed everything else?" Ms. Jenkins leaned forward slightly. "Frank, emotional support is just as vital as financial. Mia needs to feel connected to you, and that's something that can't be bought. You have to start engaging with her on a deeper level." He nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom lacing her words. Beneath the unease of this conversation simmered a flicker of hope, a chance for renewal. "So where do I begin?" "Start with small conversations. Make time to understand her interests, what makes her feel safe." "It's not too late, Frank," she encouraged, her steady gaze meeting his. "The real change starts at home." Realization dawned on him. Mia's rebellion was not an end, but a new beginning. She had bravely shown signs of discomfort, but had lacked the tools to communicate her needs. He had been tuning out the most crucial element of her education, her emotional well-being. But as the conversation advanced, another layer of unease emerged. What if I fail again? What if she continues to struggle and it only validates my worst fears about being an inadequate parent? The doubt seeped into his words, a reminder of the cycle he'd been trapped in. Failure is part of the journey as a parent. It's how you respond that will define your relationship moving forward, Ms. Jenkins countered, the firm resolve in her voice propelling him forward. Face those fears head on, and you will find what both you and Mia need. Frank took a deep breath, feeling a swell of audacity rise within him. Maybe it was time to dismantle his protective walls. The thought of approaching Mia with newfound openness both exhilarated and terrified him. "After this, I'll talk to her, no matter how uncomfortable it feels," he vowed silently, embracing the revelation that temporary discomfort could lead to profound growth. As they wrapped up, Ms. Jenkins handed him another insight. "Remember, an open dialogue is essential. If she knows she can reach out, she's likely to engage more with her life, both at home and school." Leaving the cafe, he felt a mix of anxiety and empowerment surge through him. How would Mia respond? Would she accept his overtures? Or would he find himself facing layers of resentment he didn't yet know existed? The uncertainty hung around him like the dense city smog, but in that moment, it felt less suffocating. Frank was no longer simply a businessman with a life neatly curated. He was a father willing to step into the fray, pushing through the struggle to build something more genuine. With his heart racing, he pulled out his phone and texted Mia. "Hey, can we talk when you get home? I want to understand what you're going through. It's important to me." As he hit send, he knew the real challenge was only beginning. Would this be the moment that changed everything, or yet another false start? Each tick of the watch felt like a countdown, the stakes amplifying. Mia's reaction could either strengthen their bond or further fracture it. What would awaited him when he returned home could alter the course of their future, fundamentally. The moment of truth drew closer, and Frank braced himself to face the repercussions of his choices. Frank stood at the threshold of his home, the comforting familiarity of the space morphing into a battleground of his anxieties. The shadows of uncertainty crept closer as he pushed the door open, revealing a mixture of chaos and calm. Mia's shoes haphazardly lined by the entrance, and the distant sound of music spilling from her room. Taking a moment to collect himself, he stepped inside, each footfall echoing a soft reminder of the stakes involved. This was no longer just a conversation. It was a potential lifeline. It wasn't merely about fixing things, but rather about understanding who Mia was becoming and how he could step into that evolving reality alongside her. "Mia?" he called, his voice resonating with a mixture of authority and vulnerability. Both roles he'd played before, but never quite like this. Silence enveloped him, underscoring the dissonance between expectation and reality. He wasn't someone who adeptly navigated emotional landscapes. He had built a life around stability and control. But control had offered little solace in their current predicament. How could he find his footing if Mia remained silent? Would his admission of failure push her further away, or pull her closer? "Mia, can we talk for a minute?" He tried again, this time infused with a gentle insistence, enough to cut through the music. The sound dimmed, and after what felt like an eternity, he heard a hesitant footstep. She emerged from her room, her posture stiff, casting a wary glance his way. The fire of rebellion that had marked her recent demeanor flickered uncertainly. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, her tone mixed with youthful defiance and something softer, a hint of vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. "Can we sit?" he asked, motioning toward the living room. Frank led the way, acutely aware of the gap forming between them, a chasm filled with hesitance and unspoken words. Once seated, Frank deliberately took a breath, his mind racing through Ms. Jenkins' advice. "I wanted to talk about school. I know things have been different lately." Mia studied him, her expression hard to decipher. "You mean I've been skipping classes?" "Yes, I've heard," he managed to say, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he hadn't been there to see the signs earlier. "But what I really want to know is why." Her gaze fell to the floor, and in that moment, he could see the walls she had built around herself. It's hard. Everything feels too much sometimes, you know. Like no matter how hard I try, it's never enough." Frank felt a jolt of recognition. Her struggles mirrored the weight he had carried himself. He had assumed that success equated to happiness, but now he realized he had projected his own fears onto her. "I'm sorry, Mia. I thought if I worked hard enough, I could give you everything you needed, and that meant less worry for you," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "It's not about that, Dad. It's just, I need you there too. Not just as my provider, but as my dad. When I feel—" Her voice trailed off, trembling on the edge of emotion. "Feel what? Please tell me," he urged, sensing this was the pivotal moment to peel back the layers. "Like I don't belong, or if I fail, it'll prove I'm not good enough. It's exhausting." The words tumbled out, and Frank could hear the weight of Mia's burdens in her tone, the fears he had unknowingly mirrored in his actions. His heart sank, recognition dawning upon him. He had equated his success with her security, but hadn't realized the responsibility of emotional guidance transcended financial support. "I won't let you feel that way. Not anymore. I want to help Mia. Together we can figure this out," he said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. As relief washed over her face, Frank felt a surge of determination. The path ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. And more importantly, Mia was willing to meet him halfway. Still, a question loomed over them, heavy with implications. Could he dismantle his own fears and truly become the father she needed? This was just the beginning. The tension of vulnerability lingered palpably. Their struggles echoed silently between them, but in that shared space, they were also forging a tentative bond. What would happen next? Frank knew they had uncharted territory ahead, but the stakes shifted from fear to possibility. The true test of their connection awaited. Would they both be able to confront the ghosts of their pasts and emerge stronger together? Frank leaned back in his chair, the conversation suspended in a thin layer of hope. It was as if the air had shifted, allowing them both to breathe a little easier. Yet, beneath that fragile surface lay the uncharted depths of their respective fears. He felt a mix of anticipation and dread for what lay ahead. But more importantly, it was the urgency of their situation that propelled him. Mia's struggles were not just reflective of teenage angst. They echoed the turmoil he had buried deep within himself. "What if," he began, hesitating as he gathered his thoughts. "What if we tackled this together? What if we made a plan?" Mia's eyes brightened slightly but retracted into a cautious glare. "A plan? Like what? You mean study schedules and rules?" Her skepticism was evident, but Frank saw a flicker of curiosity beneath it. "Not just rules, Mia. What if we made it a project? Something we could both focus on?" As hesitance enveloped the room once more, he realized how important it was not to dictate the terms, but to collaborate. He wanted to engage her in a way that recognized her agency without imposing his will. They needed to share this burden, lest it fracture them further. "But how do I even start?" Mia whispered, her defenses slowly crumbling. "I can't just go back and pretend everything's fine." "Maybe we don't have to pretend. But perhaps we can identify what's really weighing you down," Frank urged, sensing the shift within her. It felt like stepping on unsteady ground, but he had learned in his career that vulnerability often forged stronger connections. As they discussed the idea of a plan, Mia gradually opened up about her challenges, challenging subjects, social pressures, and even the jealousy of classmates. Each detail she shared felt like a brick lifted from a wall built years ago. And for Frank, a new realization dawned upon him. Her academic struggles were but a symptom of the unseen pressures she faced, mirroring his own unaired fears about failure and inadequacy. He nodded, understanding illuminating his face. "We can start small, identify those subjects that feel overwhelming one at a time. I can help find resources, or we could even bring in a tutor." "Why would you care all of a sudden?" Mia cut him off, sensing the insincerity hidden beneath his good intentions. Frank took a deep breath. "Because whether you think so or not, I want to be here for you, Mia. You don't have to navigate this alone. I've realized I need to be more than just a provider. I have to be your father. That starts now. It starts with listening, learning, and working together." A flicker of hope ignited in Mia's eyes, but with it came uncertainty. What if this just leads to more disappointment? Facing her question, Frank's heart raced. This wasn't merely exploratory. It was an uncharted course threatening to expose both of their vulnerabilities. "Then we'll adjust, and if we fail at something, we'll take it as a lesson. But not trying would be the real failure." Mia remained silent, contemplating the boundaries they were beginning to redefine. It was a moment of reckoning for both father and daughter. The opportunity for growth had landed at their feet like an unwrapped gift, awaited but full of uncertainty. Yet, in that tenuous space between discomfort and possibility, Mia edged forward. "Okay. I'd be willing to try. But you have to promise to really listen." Frank nodded, commitment solidifying in his chest. "I promise." They lingered in that moment of understanding, but unease persisted in the background, waiting for the opportunity to resurface. Could they truly navigate future conversations without a guide, allowing the traces of past misunderstandings to dictate their path? As they began to sketch out their newfound plan, Frank felt a familiar seed of doubt creeping in. Was he ready to be more? The answer hung heavily in the air, a question without resolution or comfort. There was still much to uncover. Would confronting their fears signal the dawn of a renewed relationship? Or would the ghosts of lingering mistrust rise to thwart their progress? With the stakes higher than ever, Frank could sense the moment drawing near. What awaited them on this path could change everything. The next morning brought with it an air of uncertainty that hung thick around Frank's shoulders. The promise he had made to Mia resonated in his mind. Every thought about their new plan felt weighted, not just by anxiety, but by an expectation he dared to hope could change everything between them. It was time to act, to forge this new path, but he felt the grip of doubt tightening like a noose. The first challenge lay in identifying the specific subjects that overwhelmed Mia the most. They had agreed to meet after school to discuss it. A small step, perhaps. But Frank understood the importance of creating a safe space for honesty. As he busied himself with work, every tick of the clock felt like a reminder of the internal battle he faced. He was no longer just a benevolent father. He was a partner, a companion, and that role required a different kind of strength than what he was accustomed to. Once Mia arrived home, her expression was a blend of excitement and anxiety. They settled in the living room, a common place transformed into a space for intent. Frank's heart paced in sync with Mia's shallow breaths as they began. "I stuck a note on my math book," she said, her fingers nervously playing with her hair. "The teacher, she's scary, and I don't understand anything, so I just—" Mia hesitated, a shadow flickering across her features. "I didn't go." Frank felt as if a sharp knife pierced through his concern. "You didn't go?" His voice was firmer than intended, mounting pressure hanging in the air. "I didn't tell you because I thought it would be easier if I just didn't mention it," Mia mumbled. The conviction in her silence struck him. This wasn't just about the subjects anymore. It was about a deeper fear. Fear of judgment, disappointment, or even shame. "We can talk to your teacher together. You don't have to face this alone." Mia tilted her head, skepticism rekindling. "And what if she hates me? What if she thinks I'm a loser?" Frank felt his insides twist uncomfortably. Those very thoughts had sabotaged his own ambitions in the past. "Then we'll face that too. Believe me, standing up to your fears is the first step to conquering them, no matter how daunting." He sensed a flicker of resolve in her eyes, but the wariness bloomed again, overshadowing her newfound courage. "It's just so hard to believe anyone could want to help." "Then let's prove that wrong together," Frank urged, pouring everything he had into his gaze. "We're going to learn how to unlock those doors that have kept you from being seen. I won't let you slip into the shadows." Mia's expression exposed a crack in her defenses, a vulnerability Frank felt compelled to protect. As they charted the subjects contributing to her efforts to evade school, they also began to unveil the myriad of reasons fueling her absence: confusion, fear of failure, and the harsh judgment of peers. For the first time, Frank witnessed the full spectrum of her struggles. Their conversation shifted from academia to the undercurrents of Mia's social interactions, an exploration that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Frank wasn't just listening. He was dissecting, analyzing the implications of her struggles with deeper layers of self-worth. She began to describe her friends, her attempts to fit in, and an overwhelming sensation of inadequacy. Each confession echoed the remnants of his own teenage insecurities. The deeper they delved, the clearer it became. Mia's avoidance of responsibilities was but a symptom of a pervasive fear of being hurt, misunderstood. Frank caught himself recalling instances in his own life when he had chosen to retreat instead of confront. This realization ignited a fierce determination within him. If not for himself, then for her sake, he had to confront his fears of inadequacy. Yet, even as they plotted this course of action, An unsettling churn in his gut told him the facade of control was an illusion. With every layer they unearthed, Frank could feel the impending strain of emotional exposure looming on the horizon. "Will you still support me?" Mia's question broke through the tension, her eyes reflecting a blend of vulnerability and yearning. Frank reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly. "We're in this together, regardless of the outcome. I won't abandon you." But in the recesses of his mind, a nagging thought lingered. Would his past transgressions morph into unseen barriers in their renewed bond? The moment was electric with potential, yet tainted by apprehension. Frank understood they were wading into turbulent waters where revelations awaited. Would their resolve lead to empowerment, or expose fractures that could shatter the connection they had only just begun to rebuild? As he sat in the throes of conflicted emotions, the path ahead felt more uncertain than ever. With the stakes now transcending academics, the next step loomed larger. What uncoded truths lay hidden beneath their burgeoning dialogue? And could they unearth them without losing each other in the process? The morning light filtered through the living room window, illuminating the remnants of yesterday's intense conversation that lingered like an unfinished symphony. Frank was invigorated yet drained, the commitment he made to support Mia twisting into both a challenge and an opportunity. As he moved through the routine of brewing his coffee, a profound weight settled in his chest, sharpening his focus. Today, they would confront Mia's fears head-on. The plan was set, a meeting with her math teacher. The gravity of the endeavor made his hands tremble slightly as he poured the steaming liquid into his mug. He had spent countless hours laying the groundwork for success in his own career, yet this felt monumentally different. He was an employee, a strategist where numbers prevailed. But in this new world of emotional navigation, the rules felt displaced. Mia appeared moments later, her hair tousled and eyes still blinking away remnants of sleep. He noticed her hesitance, the way she lingered at the threshold of the living room, the contrast of morning life against the aftermath of their raw dialogue. "You ready?" he asked, injecting a note of calmness into his voice that he didn't completely feel. She shrugged, but the slight upward curve of her lips betrayed a flicker of readiness that he hoped to cultivate. He decided to bolster her courage with an anecdote from his own youth, recalling a time when he faced a teacher he feared, one whose scowl still haunted his school memories. The laughter they shared briefly melted the ice of contention that had built since yesterday. As they prepared to leave, Frank's internal narrative transformed from mere paternal obligation into a mission of shared strength. He was not just advocating for Mia, he was claiming his space as her ally, piecing together an evolving strategy that went beyond academics. It was about resilience, a tool he had learned to wield skillfully in the boardrooms, but often neglected in personal spheres. When they arrived at the school, it felt almost surreal, a vast expanse of lockers and classrooms buzzing with students, exuding mixed emotions of anxiety and laughter. The building, once an echo of his own past, now loomed ominously. Shoulders squared, he turned to Mia. "Just remember, every great journey begins with a single step. I'm right here with you." Mia nodded, though her gaze darted hypnotically across the chaotic backdrop. Together they walked towards the teacher's classroom, a palpable tension coiling between them. Inside, the teacher's desk loomed as an imposing fortress. Frank knocked on the door, and once invited in, they were greeted by the math teacher, whose features reflected a formidable air of authority. The moment of confrontation had arrived, but what struck Frank was not the teacher's unsettling demeanor, but Mia's quivering resolve beside him. In that moment, the emotional stakes crystallized. This wasn't merely academics. It was a critical junction in Mia's understanding of herself, a defining moment that would influence her handling of conflict for years to come. Mia stammered the initial introduction, her voice shaky. I needed to talk about math." The vulnerability drafted across her face jumped out, a stark contrast to the previous day's bravado. As the conversation unfolded, with Frank aiding her articulation, he grasped that the teacher's authoritative posture could be reshaped. It became increasingly clear that Mia's fears were not exclusively rooted in the subject matter. They originated from her interactions with authority figures, an autonomy eroded by vulnerability. Frank actively participated, sharing insights about how camaraderie can transform even the sternest interactions. But what surprised him was the teacher's revelation. She had often reached out, noticing Mia's absence and frustration. The barriers between them began to dissolve, unexpectedly crackling with potential for connection and understanding. After their session, as Mia emerged with a newfound flicker of satisfaction, Frank marveled at the abrupt shift within her disposition. "How do you feel?" he asked, watching her cautiously. "I can't believe I actually talked to her." His heart swelled as she beamed, a victory over self-doubt arching her lips. Yet, in the recesses of his mind, lingering questions vibrated like static electricity. Had this merely scratched the surface of her complicated emotions? With each stride home, Frank realized they had unveiled a small pocket of empowerment, but tethered to this victory was the fear that deeper layers remained untouched. What else lay beneath the surface of Mia's struggles that they had yet to confront? As they arrived, he felt the urgency of the unknown crawling under his skin. The morning had been a testament to their resilience, but the lingering uncertainty felt like a dark cloud overshadowing their triumph. Frank's resolve deepened. This journey was just beginning, and its revelations would demand an unwavering commitment to authenticity. What truths were still concealed within their tenuous bond, and could they persevere through the questions that awaited them? A cloud of white steam curled up from Frank's coffee cup, but it offered little warmth against the rising tension he felt as he stared at the kitchen table. Mia had returned to her room, buoyed by their earlier success, yet a gnawing sense of control slipped from his grasp as he pondered the revelations still awaiting them. He needed to maintain momentum, to strike before the self-doubt crept back in. Mia's triumph was a spark, but he feared the flames of her insecurities were not extinguished. Was it time for him to confront the deeper issues she was battling? Did she truly understand the significance of what they'd achieved together? He felt compelled to navigate through her doubts, to unearth whatever further ambivalence lay hidden beneath her newfound confidence. Musing on his own experiences, he remembered some of the most transformative moments in his career. Each one had come with a bracing confrontation, be it with a client, a competitor, or sometimes even with himself. The operation before him now was not dissimilar. Would engaging Mia in an even more candid dialogue, exposing the raw vulnerabilities festering beneath her surface, facilitate her growth? He set out to make a plan. Later that evening, as they settled into the living room, he observed her posture. Her shoulders still held the remnants of unprocessed tension. He crossed the room, acutely aware of the need for a tactical approach. With a gentle tone, he broached the subject. "Mia, we talked today about math and how to face challenges. I think we should take this a step further. If you're all right with it, I'd love to hear more about how you feel about school, and anything else you may want to share." Mia looked up at him, her brow furrowed in deep thought. The slight hesitance that he noticed earlier crept back into her demeanor. "I don't want to sound like I'm whining," she replied, her voice small, as if it had to navigate around invisible barriers. Frank sensed her reservation, a crisscross of vulnerability and a fight to remain composed. "It's okay," he encouraged. "I'm not here to judge. This is a safe space. I want to support you as best I can." As the seconds passed, Mia's discomfort seemed to swell, but he remained still, allowing silence to nudge her towards honesty. Her fingers fidgeted with the seams of her sweater. He branded her hesitance as a signal. The competition between fear and the need to be heard was palpable. "I feel embarrassed sometimes," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I'm not smart enough when I see everyone else understand things so quickly. I feel tired of trying." Her admission struck a chord within him. This wasn't about mathematics. It was about the weights she carried. Frank felt a new pulse of responsibility to stand beside her, but he also questioned. Could his own childhood fears be magnified in her experience? "Have you ever thought about why it feels tiring?" he asked softly, probing deeper into the heart of her dilemma. Mia hesitated, then scrunched her eyebrows as she mulled over the question. "I guess I don't think I belong, or that I'm just waiting to fail. Like everyone will find out I'm not really good at anything." Frank contemplated her words, recognizing the insidious nature of those thoughts. She was echoing sentiments he too had struggled with in the corporate world, scrutinized at every turn. Wanting to validate her emotions, he shared his own experience. "You know, even as an adult, I sometimes feel the same way. Each new project is like standing at a cliff, with doubts waiting to pull me down. But the only way to get through is to acknowledge those fears. Then we can start to dismantle them together." The connection they forged in that moment began to illuminate a new pathway. Frank could see Mia grappling with the tension between her fears and the burgeoning resilience blossoming within her. Yet, as he continued talking, an undercurrent of worry surged through him. Were they truly ready to face whatever lay beneath the surface? With a newfound determination, he decided their next steps would focus on confronting these shadows. But another question loomed larger. What would it take for both of them to turn their vulnerabilities into strengths? And in that orbit of uncertainty, Frank felt a surge of urgency. If they continued to peel back the layers, would they uncover even deeper fears threatening to shatter their progress? The following days felt decisive, each interaction layered with the weight of potential transformation. Frank realized that, for him and Mia, confronting fears and insecurities meant not just opening up dialogues, but deepening the trust that had been frayed over time. Every conversation with his daughter carried a distinct urgency. This was the moment of truth, the brink between healing and repeating mistakes. Sitting across from Mia at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and remnants of half-finished homework, Frank sensed her trepidation as acutely as his own. He had promised her support. Now he had to embody that promise. "Mia," he began, his voice steady. "Let's talk about what we can do to make school feel less overwhelming. You mentioned feeling tired and embarrassed. What if we turned that around together?" Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he noticed a glimmer of hope beneath the defensive facade. "I guess I'm just so scared of disappointing you," she hesitated, grappling with the vulnerability that had perpetually clouded their conversations. The truth hit Frank hard. She was still seeking his approval above all else, just as he had wanted from his own father. The relentless cycle of expectation had cast shadows over their relationship. "Mia, I need you to know that your worth isn't defined by grades or achievements. Disappointment is part of growth. I'm allowed to be proud of you whether you succeed or fail," he reassured, leaning into his own authenticity. As they delved deeper into their discussion, Mia shared her struggle with perfectionism, a relentless pressure she had internalized in the pursuit of being the ideal daughter. Each confession led them to explore the tangled roots of her frustrations, feelings that mirrored Frank's own experience with success and adequate self-worth. Frank empowered her to outline her goals, not just for academics, but for her overall well-being. "Let's draft a plan that includes not only study time, but breaks and hobbies you enjoy. We can even schedule some time for family outings or activities." He wanted Mia to visualize a life filled with joy that transcended the oppressive nature of expectations. Mia's expression softened, clearly processing the idea. "Would that help me feel less anxious?" she asked, her voice barely above a murmur. "Completely. Balance is key. We can work toward creating a space where it's okay to fail, a cushion for trying new things without fear." His commitment solidified as she nodded, uncertainty still tracing maps across her features, but he could see the willingness to embrace the messiness of life staring back at him. The week passed, revealing challenges but also sparks of joy they hadn't seen in years. They navigated frustrations around homework assignments together, Frank employing humor and encouragement instead of impatience. Each time Mia stumbled and questioned herself, Frank reminded her of the strength rooted in vulnerability. Yet there was one conversation that still loomed ahead, addressing the impact of their newfound honesty with Miss Jenkins. Frank recognized he couldn't avoid the teacher again. He needed to prove that their commitment to courageous communication extended beyond their own conversation. He approached Mia one evening, heart racing with the stakes of this casual yet monumental decision. "How about we schedule another meeting with Ms. Jenkins? I think it could be a chance for both of us to get clarity on how to support you going forward." Her face twisted into a frown. "But what if she thinks I'm still not doing anything right? I can't face that shame." "Mia," he replied, grounding himself in compassion. "We aren't walking this path alone. That's why I'm here. We can go together. You'll have my support every step of the way, just like you've worked through everything with me." The invitation for active participation resonated with her. Reluctantly, Mia agreed, perhaps sensing that the true test of their relationship would indeed encompass every challenge, no matter how daunting. When, on the day of their meeting, Frank stood in the bustling hallway of the school, the weight of memories flooded back. The anxieties of old clung to him. However, today was different. They were there for a unified purpose. As they entered the classroom, the air hummed with possibilities. Ms. Jenkins welcomed them, expressions reluctant yet curious. Frank sat, Mia by his side, a shared alliance signaling that this time they would stand together. "What's troubling you?" Ms. Jenkins asked, her tone neutral yet inviting. Frank took a deep breath, anchors of trust tying him to Mia. "We've been having conversations at home about Mia's journey, and we think it would be helpful if we could work together to enhance her experience in class. It's become evident that an open dialogue with you could foster that." Mia glanced up, visibly more relaxed as she opened up about her fears and challenges. To Frank's amazement, a hidden strength emerged within her. Ms. Jenkins listened intently, validating Mia's concerns while presenting recommendations that reinforced a curriculum adaptable to student needs. When the meeting concluded, Frank felt a rush of pride bloom within him. They had stood united against the tides of uncertainty, not just seeking solutions, but forging a shared bond in the process. Mia, buoyed by her own voice, smiled genuinely, a promise of partnership forming between them. As they stepped into their own shared world, the air felt lighter. Both of them were now committed to a journey where learning, laughter, and growth challenged their limits. Frank, reflected by the sheer pride he felt, understood that success was not just in financial achievements, but in nurturing a foundation for connection, trust, and love. With each step toward home, he realized that they were building a solid bridge across an expanse that once felt so steep. They would navigate this path together, equipped with empathy and profound understanding, a concrete foundation of achievement rooted in emotional well-being. And in that shared moment, Frank's heart swelled with satisfaction, for he had conquered not just the complex web of familial disconnection, but had also achieved his ultimate goal, becoming an emotionally present father. He had transformed vulnerability into strength, proving that true success begins at home. Now the next chapters awaited to be written. The journeys were only just beginning. Each step toward their renewal was a confident stride into the realm of authenticity, and Frank was ready to embrace it. You need to subscribe now to keep witnessing these transformative journeys and to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and to support this channel. Your engagement matters. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment below with your thoughts and reactions. What are your theories about the next steps for Frank and Mia? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't wait. Even one more second to support authentic stories of personal triumph.